You've got 5 minutes before I pronounce him dead. That's what the real doctor said as he wiped his sweat in panic. William Sullivan, the richest man in Horrington, had stopped breathing. His daughter was sobbing. And the only man who could save him was Jared, the same criminal she had just kicked out. Jared walked in slowly, calm. 81 needles, he said. And don't interrupt me this time. Everyone thought he was crazy, but no one stopped him, because when death knocks, even doubters go silent. 5 minutes later, the impossible happened. Before the world called him Miracle Doctor, Jared was just a convict walking out of Horrington prison. "I'm finally out!" Jared Chance exclaimed as he forcefully took a deep breath of fresh air. Behind him was Horrington prison, where he had been locked up for the past 3 years. Today was the day he was released. I wonder how my parents are doing," he muttered, concern creeping into his voice. With a torn canvas bag on his back, Jared hurried home right away. Over the last 3 years, his parents had never visited him. Hence, he was worried about them. On the way home, Jared kept looking at the bronze-colored ring he was wearing. There was a lifelike dragon carved on it. On top of the dragon's head was a special symbol. The ring had been given to him by Draco, a friend from prison. Draco was a strange man. He would constantly ramble on about how he was the leader of the dragon sect and knew everything, including astrology, geography, medicine, and more. Not only that, he even claimed that he could bring someone back from the dead. Everyone treated Draco as a madman and ignored him accordingly. Only Jared would chat with him and share his food occasionally. Draco would tell Jared all sorts of strange stories about the dragon sect and Dragon Island. These were names that Jared had never heard before. Moreover, Draco would get Jared to accompany him in his meditation and martial arts training. Given how bored Jared was in prison, he gladly went along with it. At the end of 3 years, Jared had learned a plethora of martial arts techniques and medical skills from Draco. On the fateful day of Jared's release, Draco gave the ring to Jared and told him to go to Nameless Island within the Eastern Sea on the 15th of July that year. There, he was supposed to flash his ring and someone would pick him up. When that happened, Jared would be bestowed with a wonderful opportunity. Considering how much he had learned from Draco, Jared naturally took his words seriously and promised to do as he was told. Nevertheless, there were still a few more months to go before July. Before he knew it, Jared had arrived at the entrance to his home. When he saw the dilapidated house in front of him, he felt a sense of bitterness, as he had no knowledge of how his parents had held up during the 3 years. Due to my rash actions, my parents must have suffered a lot, he thought to himself, guilt weighing heavy on his heart. Thinking back to what had happened 3 years ago, Jared was filled with anger. Back then, he and his girlfriend, Sandy Gibson, were at the stage where they were talking about marriage. They were classmates at university and had been in a relationship for 2 years. One day, when he was walking Sandy back home, both of them ran into Leighton Scott, who was drunk. Leighton was a rich kid in Horrington, well known for his misdeeds. When he saw how pretty Sandy was, he harbored unpleasant intentions and began touching her inappropriately. As a famous rich kid, Leighton didn't even bother to look at Jared. Consequently, Jared was incensed when he saw his girlfriend being taken advantage of. Picking up a brick from the ground, he smashed it onto Leighton's head. One didn't need to be a genius to guess the outcome. Considering how powerful Leighton was, he called the police, who arrested Jared. Because of that, Jared was sentenced to 3 years in prison for assault. After hesitating for a long time, Jared knocked gently on the door. "Who is it?" called a frail voice from inside. When the door opened, a hunched-back old lady with a head full of white hair popped her head out. Reaching out one hand as if to feel something, she asked again, "Who is it? Who's knocking on the door?" The old lady's eyes were closed shut. It could not be more obvious that she was blind. Jared was stunned the moment he saw her. His eyes widened in shock while his entire body trembled slightly. He could not believe that the old, wrinkled lady was his mother, Hannah Thompson. How did Mom end up in such a state in just 3 years' time? He thought, horrified. "Mom, it's me, Jared!" he called out emotionally as he stepped forward to support her. "Jared, is it really you?" Hannah gasped as she used her hands to feel Jared's face, tears beginning to roll down her cheeks. "Mom, it's me. It's really me," Jared replied, his voice choked with emotion. Tears were also welling up in Jared's eyes. "Mom, what happened to you?" he asked softly, still unable to believe her condition. Jared was baffled as to how his previously healthy mother had turned out this way after just 3 short years. It's a long story. Come in first before we talk," Hannah said as she pulled Jared into the house. Seeing how empty their decrepit house was, Jared was shocked beyond belief. Although they were not rich, his father had a steady job. Therefore, they previously led a simple yet comfortable life. "Mom, what happened to our house?" Jared questioned in horror. Hannah let out a weary sigh. After you left, she began. His mother then related everything to him. After Jared was sent to prison, the Scott family didn't let the matter rest. Instead, they demanded $1 million in compensation. Left without a choice, Jared's parents sold the house they bought for his marriage and borrowed a lot of money. Even then, it was not enough. Finally, they had to pay the last $300,000 in installments. Thus, Jared's father lost his job and could only find work as a street cleaner. As for his mother, she cried all day long until she went blind. That was also the reason why his parents never visited him. While listening to his mother, Jared gradually clenched his fists as his eyes glowed with anger. He had not expected the Scott family to show his family no mercy. "Mom, did Sandy not help you at all?" Jared asked in a puzzled tone. "Sandy and I were about to be married. Furthermore, I was jailed defending her honor. There's no way she could just sit by and watch my parents end up in this state, right?" he wondered to himself. Letting out another sigh, Hannah replied, "Let's not bring that up. Not only did the Gibson family ignore us, but they also didn't even return the betrothal gift when I asked for it back. They claimed it wasn't their fault that the wedding fell through because you went to prison. That's why they refused to return it. When your dad argued with them, he was even beaten for it," she added, her voice trembling. The more Hannah talked about it, the more depressed she became. In the end, her tears just wouldn't stop. "Did the Gibsons really do that?" Jared furrowed his eyebrows as he spoke, unable to believe Sandy would do something like that. Back when he was arrested, she had even screamed in tears, saying that she would wait to marry him after he was released from prison. Why did it turn out this way? He wondered silently. As a result, Jared decided to see Sandy and ask her about it. Suddenly, someone banged on their door heavily. The impact was so forceful that the door almost collapsed from it. The moment Hannah heard the knock, her face turned pale in terror. "Mom, who is it?" Jared asked curiously, noticing his mother's reaction. "Don't get involved. Go to your room quickly and don't come out no matter what," Hannah urged, pushing him into his room. After shutting his door, Hannah anxiously went to open the front door. Just as she did, a bald man entered with a group of fierce-looking men whose bodies were covered with tattoos. "Have you prepared the money?" the bald man asked, glancing at Hannah coldly. "Baldy, I have. It's here," Hannah replied nervously as she nodded repeatedly and felt for a pouch in the corner. At that moment, many of the neighbors had crowded around. However, they kept their distance at the sight of Baldy. "These guys come asking for money every month. What a ruthless bunch," whispered one neighbor under their breath. "Exactly. Where is the rule of law?" another muttered. "Shoosh, not so loud. They have been sent by the Scott family to collect money on schedule," a third cautioned in a hushed tone. The neighbors hid by the side and criticized the men's actions, but unfortunately no one dared to interfere. Meanwhile, Baldy snatched the pouch from Hannah's hands and opened it to check. "What is this supposed to be?" he growled, knitting his eyebrows as he turned the pouch inside out. Torn notes and spare change dropped out. There was 100, a 50, a couple of ones, and a load of coins. "Does this even add up to 10,000? Baldy thundered at Hannah. "Baldy, it's all there, and we counted it. If you don't believe me, you can count it yourself," Hannah said with an obsequious smile as she nodded. "Are you kidding me?" Baldy snapped and kicked Hannah in the abdomen, sending her crashing onto the ground. "How dare you ask me to count? I have no time for this. Change all of them to hundreds." "Mom!" Jared cried out as he dashed out of his room and quickly helped Hannah up. Then he swept an icy gaze across Baldy and his men, sending a chill down their spines. "Jared, you shouldn't be out here. Go back into your room and don't get involved," Hannah begged as she tried to push him back. "Mom, since I'm home, let me deal with this. You should just sit tight," Jared replied firmly. After settling Hannah down on a chair, Jared turned to glare at Baldy. Having scrutinized Jared, Baldy sneered and said, "Aren't you the guy who hit Mr. Scott with a brick and got imprisoned for 3 years? I'm surprised that you're out. Your timing is impeccable. Today is the day your girlfriend and Mr. Scott are going to get married. As her ex-boyfriend, aren't you going to attend it?" "Loser!" one of Baldy's men added as they all burst out laughing. "What did you say?" Jared snapped, furrowing his brows in disbelief. "I said the girl you went to prison for is marrying Mr. Scott today. The wedding is being held at Glamour Hotel, and it is certainly luxurious. Aren't you going to have a look?" Baldy taunted, smirking at Jared. As the frown on Jared's face deepened, he balled his hands into fists. Behind him, Hannah was trembling all over, as her expression drastically changed. She couldn't believe Sandy had married the man responsible for Jared's imprisonment. "Kneel and apologize to my mother. Do it, and I'll spare your lives." Jared said, his gaze turning frosty as a murderous aura emanated from his body. Feeling the tension in the air, Baldy and his men stopped laughing. After a while, comprehension dawned on Baldy and he fumed. "What did you say? You want me to kneel and apologize?" Just as he spoke, Baldy threw a punch in Jared's direction. Given how scrawny Jared looked, he figured a single punch would take him out. To everyone's surprise, Jared launched a kick in response to Baldy's attack. Grabbing his stomach in pain, Baldy collapsed to the ground. He was drenched in sweat as he cried out in agonizing pain. "Jared, you can't afford to get into a fight again!" Hannah bellowed in panic when she heard Baldy's repeated groans. Jared was imprisoned because of assault. What if he gets arrested again for fighting, she thought in terror. "All of you, beat him!" Baldy roared with a vicious stare. With that, Baldy's men charged at Jared. After giving his mother a glance, Jared suddenly flicked both his hands, unleashing multiple flashes of light. The next moment, his attackers felt their legs go weak before dropping to their knees. Shocked by the turn of events, Baldy stared at Jared in disbelief as fear began to creep into him. Even the neighbors watching widened their eyes in amazement. "Apologize to my mother," Jared demanded again in an icy tone. After a brief hesitation, Baldy had no choice but to kneel when his eyes met Jared's piercing gaze. "We're sorry," Baldy and his men said in unison, their heads bowed. "Get lost," Jared snapped with a wave of his hand. Even though he could have finished them off with a flick of his finger, he didn't want to harm anyone in front of his mother and neighbors. While Baldy was helped out of the house by his men, he shot an insidious glare at Jared before hobbling out. Evidently, he was still fuming over what had happened. Nevertheless, Jared didn't fear Baldy's vengeance at all. "Mom, are you all right?" Jared asked with concern after Baldy and the rest left. "Those men are gone." "Why did you have to come out and offend him?" Hannah scolded in a trembling voice. "Pick up the money from the floor quickly. It's what we have painstakingly saved all this while," she added, glancing toward the scattered coins. Stooping to the ground, Jared put the notes and loose change back into the pouch. "Mom, I'll be the breadwinner going forward, while you and Dad can rest. As for your eyes, I'll think of a way to get them treated," he assured gently. When he was done picking the money up, he returned the pouch to Hannah. "I'm glad to hear you say that," Hannah replied, before bursting into tears again. "Now that you're back, my mind is finally put at ease. If it wasn't because I was worried about you, I would have been dead long ago," she sobbed. Jared's eyes welled up when he saw the look on his mother's face. Unable to hold back his emotions, he slammed his fist on the table. The table shattered into pieces instantly. "The Scotts, the Gibsons, I will definitely make all of you pay," Jared vowed to himself, a burning rage growing from within. Sensing Jared's fury, Hannah quickly added, "Jared, please don't cause any more trouble. Now that you're back, you should get a proper job. Everything will work out after that." "Mom, don't worry. I know what to do. Anyway, I'm heading out," Jared said, gently patting her hand. After comforting his mother, Jared planned to confront Sandy and demand to know what had truly happened. While leaving his home, Jared was filled with anger. Just as he was crossing the road, a red Porsche sped toward him and crashed into him, sending him flying. Jared landed heavily on the ground. He would likely have been seriously injured if not for his training with Draco. "Who's the crazy driver?" Jared shouted in frustration, already enraged from everything that had happened. In the midst of Jared's curses, a female voice cried out from behind the wheel, "Why don't you watch where you're walking?" The next moment, a beautiful woman stepped out of the Porsche. She was wearing a white full-length dress and stilettos, and she stared angrily at Jared. Furrowing his eyebrows, Jared decided to lie back down instead of getting up. "Which of us do you think is blind? Obviously, you were the one who knocked into me. In spite of the pretty face, why do you have such a foul mouth?" Jared retorted sharply. "How dare you scold me?" the woman snapped, glaring at him as she suddenly raised her leg to stomp on him. Considering she was wearing stilettos, her heels were the equivalent of sharp daggers. If she struck him, it would definitely cause a serious wound. "Josephine, stop!" came a sharp voice from behind. Just as the woman was about to strike Jared, a middle-aged man got out from the back seat of the car. He was surrounded by an air of authority and was obviously someone important. However, his face was pale and his breathing was rapid. After calling out briefly, he held onto the car for support as he desperately tried to catch his breath. "Dad, why did you come down?" Josephine asked, alarmed as she rushed over to support him. "Let's hurry to the hospital and not waste any more time," the middle-aged man remarked weakly. Josephine nodded and turned back toward Jared. She took out a stack of money and threw it in front of him. "Here's 10,000. Take the money and leave. "We have an urgent matter to attend to," she said curtly. Instead of taking the money, Jared stood up and took a glance at the middle-aged man. He then remarked calmly, "There's no need to go to the hospital. It's already too late." When he finished speaking, he turned to leave. It was obvious to him that the middle-aged man's condition was severe, and they wouldn't make it in time. "Stop!" Josephine shouted, blocking Jared's way as she glowered at him. "What do you mean by that? Speak clearly, or I won't let you go." At this moment, the middle-aged man also approached Jared with a frown of concern. "Your father's condition is dire due to the injury in his left lung. In less than 5 minutes, he will suffer from breathing difficulty and suffocate to death. Can you make it to the hospital in 5 minutes?" Jared asked the woman calmly. "You're bluffing! My dad only has the flu," Josephine began to protest. "Josephine," the middle-aged man interrupted, snapping at his daughter before taking another 2 steps toward Jared. With an astonished look, he questioned, "Young man, how do you know my left lung has been injured before? You wouldn't understand, even if I told you. Anyway, I'm busy right now and have no time to waste with the both of you," Jared replied indifferently. With that, Jared turned around and prepared to leave. "Young man," the middle-aged man called out again before breaking into an intense cough. After he managed to calm down, he grabbed Jared's arm at once and pleaded, "Young man, since you can diagnose my sickness, I'm sure you can treat it. I hope you are willing to save my life, and I'm happy to pay any price for it. Here, this is my card." The man handed Jared a card with trembling fingers. Jared didn't want to accept it or get involved. However, the moment he caught a glimpse of the name on the card, he paused and took it. "You're the CEO of Sullivan Group, William Sullivan?" Jared asked in surprise. "Yes, I am," William confirmed with a nod. All of a sudden, Jared extended his hand and pressed his finger against William's major acupoints. His actions were so swift that neither William nor Josephine had time to react. "What are you doing?" Josephine cried out, jumping between Jared and her father, but Jared was already done. As for William, he suddenly felt his breathing improve while color gradually returned to his face. "I have temporarily kept your injury in check. Considering how old your injury is, you will need a long duration of treatment in order to fully recover," Jared explained calmly. "Thank you for saving me. I really can't thank you enough," William said sincerely, grabbing Jared's hand and expressing his gratitude. Meanwhile, Josephine was astounded to see the glow return to her father's cheeks and the improvement in his condition. "I saved you because I'm aware of your philanthropic work. Considering you have built more than 10 schools, I felt obliged to do something for you," Jared added matter-of-factly. Jared had saved William because he knew of his good heart. If it had been a stranger, he naturally would not have bothered, especially after Josephine had been rude to him and nearly injured him. After all, Jared was not a saint who went around healing everyone. William was visibly embarrassed by Jared's words. "What I've done is not even worth mentioning. Young man, since you've saved me, just tell me whatever it is that you want. Now that it's almost noon, why don't I treat you to lunch at Glamour Hotel?" William offered graciously. "It's fine. I still have something to take care of," Jared replied, shaking his head as he declined the invitation. He wanted to confront Sandy and clear the air. Jared's rejection caught William by surprise. As Horrington's richest man, there were many who wanted to buy him lunch. Nevertheless, only those who walked the corridors of power had the honor of dining with him. Hence, he didn't expect Jared to refuse. "Young man, no matter what, I insist on giving you a treat to show my gratitude," William said, refusing to let go of Jared's arm. It was not lost upon Jared that William's intention behind treating him was to find out more about his follow-up treatment. In spite of that, he was moved by William's sincerity. As a result, he nodded in agreement. "All right then, I'll deal with my problem first and see you at the hotel when I'm done," Jared said, meeting William's eyes. William released his grip in response. "Fine, that settles it. Just call me when you arrive, young man," he said, smiling in relief. After acknowledging William, Jared hurried to the Gibson residence. "Where's Sandy? I want to see her." Jared cried out to a middle-aged woman standing in front of an old mansion. She was Sandy's mother, Melinda Connor. In the past, Jared would never have dared to speak to her in such a tone. However, after hearing what his mother had said, Jared was so infuriated that it was a surprise he didn't strike her on sight. Dressed in a gown, Melinda put on a haughty expression with her arms folded in front of her chest. Staring at Jared with disdain, she spat, "Get lost! My daughter is getting married today. Hence, an ex-convict like you isn't welcome here." "Getting married?" Jared repeated, knitting his eyebrows as he realized Baldy had been telling the truth. "Where's Sandy? Who is she marrying? Tell her to come out here and explain it to me," he demanded, his voice rising as a scowl formed on his face. Without waiting, Jared dashed into the mansion. "Hey, are you mad? How can you barge into my house just like that?" Melinda shouted, trying to pull Jared back. Unfortunately, it was a futile effort. Jared was too strong. Instead, she was being dragged across the yard. When she saw Jared barging in, a woman dressed in a wedding gown came out with a sullen look on her face. The moment he saw her, Jared stopped in his tracks. "Sandy, what's going on? Explain yourself," he demanded, his eyes burning with rage. "Jared, you should leave and don't come and see me again. I have decided to marry Leighton," Sandy said flatly, her tone indifferent. Narrowing his gaze, Jared clenched his fists. Even though he had already known about it, it still felt excruciating to hear Sandy say it out loud. "I went to prison because of Leighton, and now my own girlfriend is getting married to him? She's making a mockery of me," he thought bitterly. Suddenly, Jared laughed wryly when he realized how pathetic he must have seemed. "Is this what you really want?" he asked quietly, staring at her. "Yes," Sandy replied with a firm nod. "I want to be rich, which is something you will never be able to provide. Furthermore, as an ex-convict, you might not even be able to take care of yourself, let alone me. For old time's sake, here's a few hundred. Take it, so you don't have to sleep on the streets." As Sandy said that, she grabbed a bunch of hundreds and threw them at Jared's face. At that moment, Sandy was dead to him. He knew the person in front of him was no longer his girlfriend. "You will regret this," Jared roared before turning and walking away without taking the money. "I would only regret it if I married a broke nobody like you," Sandy hissed from behind, her voice full of scorn. When Jared arrived at the entrance, the groom's convoy had blocked the exit. A young man dressed in a suit and leather shoes alighted from a beautifully decorated car, holding a bouquet of flowers. That man was Leighton. The moment he saw Jared, he was momentarily stunned. When he regained his senses, he guffawed out loud. "I forgot that today is the day you're released from prison. What a wonderful coincidence. Would you like to attend my wedding with Sandy?" Leighton asked with a mocking grin, his tone tainted with mischief. Jared shot him an icy glare but said nothing. He stepped aside to leave, unwilling to waste time speaking to someone like that. "Don't go," Leighton said suddenly, blocking Jared's path. "Is it because you can't afford to buy a gift? Don't worry, you don't have to get us anything. Instead, you can have the leftovers from the banquet. We'll be having our wedding reception at Glamour Hotel. If you don't come, I'm afraid you'll never have the opportunity to eat there." Giving Jared a contemptuous smile, Leighton even patted him on the cheek. Jared slapped his hand away forcefully. "Idiot. What's so great about marrying used goods? You're just having my leftovers," Jared sneered coldly. In truth, Jared had never even touched Sandy before, not even held her hand. He simply said it to spite Leighton and get back at Sandy. The very next instant, Leighton looked in Sandy's direction. She had told him she never held Jared's hand before, but now he wasn't so sure. Sandy grew nervous when she noticed the look on Leighton's face. Turning to Jared, she thundered, "Jared, what lies are you spewing? How dare you accuse me of being a leftover? I would never let someone like you hold my hand." Even Melinda began to panic. "Jared, stop your sour grapes behavior," she snapped. "My daughter would never have let the likes of someone like you touch her." Then, she turned to Leighton and quickly added, "Leighton, don't listen to him. He is obviously saying it to spite you." Given how hard it was for her to find a rich son-in-law, she wasn't going to let Jared's words ruin everything. "Mrs. Gibson, don't worry. I won't believe him," Leighton replied calmly. Obviously, Leighton wasn't a fool to be easily taken in. "It's up to you whether you want to believe it or not," Jared said, brushing past him and walking around. "Wait," Leighton called out. "You better keep your mouth shut. If I find you spreading rumors about my wife, I'll make sure you regret it." Leighton was clearly worried that Jared would tarnish the Scott family's reputation. "My mouth is my own, and I can say whatever I want. What are you going to do about it?" Jared replied with a cold stare. "In fact, you're the one who should watch out. Or else, you won't even know what hits you the day you lose your life," he added quietly, his voice laced with menace. When his eyes locked with Jared's piercing gaze, Leighton had a sudden realization and felt a chill down his spine. Realizing he had just been humiliated, Leighton widened his eyes and threatened, "You are welcome to try if you're not afraid of death. When the time comes, you'll be begging me on your knees instead." Leighton was filled with rage. If it hadn't been his wedding day, he would have taught Jared a lesson. "We won't know till it happens. Let's wait and see," Jared replied with a scornful look. "Leighton, it's time. Let's just ignore that broke nobody," Melinda said, glancing at Jared with condescension. Holding the flowers in his hand, Leighton and his entourage walked toward the house. Watching Leighton's departing silhouette, Jared flicked his finger and shot a faint ray of light into Leighton's body. Leighton jolted slightly for a fleeting moment. However, he didn't think much of it and carried on. "Let's see if you'll kneel before me and beg," Jared muttered with a smirk as he turned and walked toward Glamour Hotel. Meanwhile, at the entrance of Glamour Hotel, William was waiting for Jared personally, causing everyone present to speculate about what was going on. "Isn't that Mr. Sullivan? It's a surprise to see him waiting for someone at the entrance. I wonder who's important enough for Mr. Sullivan to wait for," one guest whispered. "I heard the Scott family's eldest son is getting married, and the wedding is being held here. Could he be waiting for them?" another person murmured. "Maybe. After all, the Scott family is a prominent one too. He ought to show them some respect," someone else added. As the crowd gradually streamed into the Glamour Hotel, William paced back and forth anxiously at the entrance, checking his watch every now and then. "Dad, I think that guy was bluffing us," Josephine said, trying to mask her frustration. "All this talk about your injured left lung and threat to your life is nothing but nonsense. All you have is lung inflammation from your flu, so stop waiting for him and let me take you to the hospital." William had arrived half an hour ago but hadn't seen Jared yet. To Josephine, it all seemed like Jared was spouting nonsense, especially since William had never mentioned anything about an old lung injury before. Moreover, this was the first time his condition had worsened. "Josephine, there are some things you aren't aware of," William said with a grim sigh. "The doctors at the hospital have no way of seeing the injury on my left lung. This hidden ailment has been with me for more than 20 years. The only reason I didn't tell anyone was because I didn't want you to worry." Stupefied by the revelation, Josephine held her father's hand nervously. "Dad, what's going on? Please don't scare me, please," she said softly. "I already called Dr. Watson. He'll be arriving shortly." Josephine was consumed by panic. Ever since she could remember, she had never seen her mother. All this while, William had raised her alone, and they were everything to each other. If anything happened to him, she didn't know how she would go on. "It's a long story. I'll tell you when we have the time," William said reassuringly. As his words fell, he checked his watch again before gazing out into the distance. The moment he saw Jared emerge, William was filled with delight. He then ran up to Jared. "You're finally here, young man. This way, please," William said, holding on to Jared's hand with relief. "Mr. Sullivan, since I made you a promise, I would definitely turn up," Jared replied with a slight nod, aware that William had been worried he might not show up. Feeling embarrassed, William could only smile awkwardly. "After you, young man," he added politely. Given how respectfully William was behaving, everyone in the hotel began to wonder who Jared was. When Josephine saw how confidently Jared was walking, in contrast to her deferential father, she fumed. "What's wrong with you? My father waited for you at the door for half an hour, and didn't you notice that his condition seems to be deteriorating? Do you even know how to heal someone?" she snapped, her tone full of irritation. Josephine had resented Jared from the very beginning. However, she had given him the benefit of the doubt after being impressed by how he had initially stopped William's condition from worsening. A short while later, when she noticed William's cheeks losing color again, she became convinced Jared was a scammer, looking to take advantage of them. "Josephine, stop making a fuss and apologize at once," William barked with a stern look on his face. "There's no way I'm going to do that," Josephine retorted. "Look, he's barely a fully grown man. How can he be a miracle doctor? I think he's nothing but a con artist." Glaring at Jared, she blamed him for why her father refused to see a real doctor. When Josephine refused to obey, William became so furious that he began to have trouble breathing. Just when he was about to speak, William ended up coughing intensely. "Dad!" Josephine cried out as she dashed forward to support him. She gasped when she saw the black blood that William had coughed out, her face turning pale in fright. At the sight of the scene, Jared furrowed his brows. Evidently, William's injury was worse than he had initially thought. In fact, Jared was surprised William had managed to survive for so long. "Quick, carry your dad to a room," Jared ordered, seeing Josephine frozen in place. Josephine was already in a panic, but she didn't move because she still didn't trust Jared. Frowning at her hesitation, Jared snapped, "Do you want to watch him die?" Shocked into action by Jared's words, Josephine quickly helped William to a private room in the hotel. Inside, Jared immediately checked William's pulse. However, his expression turned grim the moment he did. While Jared was treating William, a bespectacled man in a white doctor's coat barged into the room. "Dr. Watson, quick! Take a look at my dad. He just vomited blood." Josephine cried out, her voice filled with desperation. The moment she saw him, she felt a flicker of hope. "What? Let me see," Jonathan the doctor said as he quickly opened his medical bag. "Move away," Josephine said as she pushed Jared aside and held William up. "Dr. Watson, my dad's life is in your hands now. Please save him," she pleaded urgently. At that moment, William was close to losing consciousness as his breathing became increasingly labored. "Don't worry, Miss Sullivan. I will do my best," Jonathan assured her as he began to take William's pulse. The longer he examined him, the more intense Jonathan's frown became. Josephine noticed his troubled expression and dared not speak a word. "Miss Sullivan," Jonathan finally said in a grave tone, "Mr. Sullivan's damaged lung is the cause of his hidden ailment. This is a chronic disease that needs to be treated slowly. However, someone has forcefully kicked his immune system into overdrive. Although it might seem effective in the short run, it will only cause his condition to deteriorate further. I'm afraid Mr. Sullivan is in a precarious state right now. Before I arrived, who did you bring him to see?" When she heard the doctor's words, Josephine's eyes immediately shifted to Jared. It had been Jared who treated her father. Just as Jonathan had described, her father had temporarily improved, but now it seemed Jared's method had made things worse. "You fraud! If anything happens to my father, I'll never forgive you!" Josephine roared, scowling at Jared with fury in her eyes. If not for the fact that she was supporting William and couldn't leave his side, she would have lunged at Jared in anger. "How can you accuse me of being a fraud? Have I taken anything from you? If it weren't for me, your father would have already been a corpse," Jared replied coldly. "I can't believe how ridiculous you're being." He hated how Josephine kept accusing him of being a scammer and how disrespectful she was despite knowing nothing about him. Josephine growled but stopped herself. Despite being enraged, she knew that saving her father was more important than arguing with Jared. "Dr. Watson, I beg you, please think of a way." "Please," she pleaded again, her voice trembling, eyes brimming with tears. Opening his medical bag, Jonathan took out a black pill and gently placed it into William's mouth. Then he opened a bag of silver needles and began inserting them into William's acupoints. "Doing this won't save him. You'll only harm him," Jared commented bluntly after observing Jonathan's acupuncture technique, making the latter knit his brows in displeasure. "What are you trying to say? Are you doubting me?" Jonathan snapped. "Don't tell me you know acupuncture." Acupuncture was part of traditional medicine. Unlike modern medicine, which could be learned within a few years, acupuncture took at least 8 to 10 years to master. In fact, some people never mastered it despite decades of training. Given that Jared looked to be only in his 20s, Jonathan figured there was no way he could possibly be a master of such a skill, even if he had started learning in his mother's womb. "What garbage are you spewing? You're not needed here. Get out!" Josephine barked, worried that Jared would disrupt the treatment. "Fine," Jared replied coolly. "You're the one that asked me to leave. I'll be waiting in the corridor. In less than 5 minutes, you'll be out there begging me to come back in." The moment he finished, Jared opened the door and stepped out. After he left, no one paid him any attention. Meanwhile, Jonathan carefully continued with William's acupuncture treatment. Soon he was drenched in sweat. After the last needle was inserted, William gradually regained consciousness and opened his eyes. "Dad! My dad is awake, Dr. Watson. He's awake. This is wonderful," Josephine cried out jubilantly, tears welling in her eyes. Just a moment ago, she had feared she would never see him open his eyes again. When Jonathan saw that William was awake, he too heaved a sigh of relief. In truth, he had barely had any confidence going in. Unfortunately, the moment Josephine and Jonathan relaxed, William began to tremble violently. He looked to be in excruciating pain as his face started turning purple. "Dad! Dad!" Josephine screamed as she turned to Jonathan in panic. "Dr. Watson, why is this happening?" Even Jonathan was so distressed that he stood there frozen. I don't know why this is happening either," Jonathan stammered. "How did it turn out this way?" "Who are you asking? You're the doctor here!" Josephine roared, her voice cracking from desperation. At the same time, William's violent shivering began to slow until he finally stopped moving. Even his breath could no longer be felt. Watching William's condition rapidly worsen, Jonathan felt his panic intensify. If anything happened to William, he would have to suffer the consequences. "Dad, don't scare me! Don't scare me!" Josephine cried, tears now streaming down her cheeks. "Miss Sullivan, let's take Mr. Sullivan to the hospital. I've run out of ideas," Jonathan suggested urgently. He hoped to send William to the hospital so he could escape blame. If William died there, the responsibility would not fall on him. "Do you take me for a fool? Given my dad's condition, there's no way he can make it to the hospital," Josephine exploded. "You better save him. If not, don't think you'll survive this unscathed." The Sullivans were the wealthiest family in Horrington. To bring down a lowly doctor would take no more than a flick of their fingers. Jonathan was stricken with terror by her threat. Nonetheless, he was out of ideas. Suddenly he remembered Jared and quickly suggested, "Miss Sullivan, the guy who just went out, perhaps he might have a solution. I think he probably knows a thing or two." Jonathan's words reminded Josephine of Jared. Still, it wasn't lost on her that Jonathan had looked down on him earlier, but was now praising him. Evidently, Jonathan was planning to let Jared take the blame. Once Jared stepped in to treat William, even if he failed, Jonathan would be able to absolve himself of responsibility. After a moment of hesitation, Josephine let go of William, who slumped back in his chair and dashed out of the room. At that moment, Jared was sitting quietly along the corridor waiting for Josephine to come find him. When she saw him still there, she rushed up to him. Just as she opened her mouth to speak, she realized she didn't know how to address him. Please save my father, I beg of you," Josephine pleaded, her expression awkward and strained. When Jared gradually raised his head to look at her, Josephine quickly averted her gaze. She didn't dare make eye contact. Not long ago, she had berated him. Now, she found herself begging instead. "Do you believe I can save your father and that I'm not a con man?" Jared asked calmly. Josephine remained silent. She didn't know how to answer. Though she didn't fully trust him, she had no other choice. Seeing her conflicted expression, Jared simply chuckled. He decided not to make things harder for her. Rising to his feet, he walked back into the room. Josephine followed Jared inside and saw Jonathan pacing back and forth, his forehead covered in sweat. The moment Jonathan saw Jared return, he looked as if he had seen his savior. Whether Jared succeeded or failed, Jonathan could now push the responsibility onto him. Lowering himself, Jonathan begged, "I'm sorry about earlier, young man. Please save Mr. Sullivan." Considering he could lose everything, Jonathan decided that being polite wouldn't hurt. After casting a glance at William, Jared sighed. "Looks like I'll have to give it my all," he murmured. Turning toward Jonathan, Jared asked, "Do you still have any silver needles?" "Yes, in the medical bag," Jonathan replied quickly. He handed over a bag of silver needles to Jared without hesitation. "It's not enough," Jared said, shaking his head. "Not enough?" Jonathan echoed, confused. "That bag contains 30 needles. How can it not be enough?" In acupuncture, anyone who could insert more than 10 needles was already considered impressive. Even the president of the Association of Traditional Medicine, John Jacobson, known as a miracle doctor, could only insert around 20 needles. So 30 was more than enough by standard practices. "It just isn't," Jared insisted. "I need more." "How many more?" Jonathan asked carefully. 81, Jared replied. Jonathan was stunned. His eyes widened in disbelief, filled with horror. However, instead of questioning further, he silently handed over all the remaining silver needles he had. After receiving them, Jared laid William's body flat on the ground. Using both hands with great speed and precision, he swiftly inserted the needles into William's body. Cold sweat began to bead on Jared's forehead. He looked as though he was exerting immense energy, and soon his clothes were completely soaked. When he inserted the final needle, Jared let out a long sigh. Drained and exhausted, he dropped down onto the ground. But just as Jared collapsed, William's body twitched, then fell still. No breath, no movement, no heartbeat. And in that chilling silence, all eyes turned to Jared. Had he saved a life, or taken one? Did Jared's miracle just fail? What happens if the Dragon Sect returns? Why does saving William nearly kill Jared?
Start listening to the exciting audio series for free